about the various 50th anniversary projects that are happening, about the characters that are celebrating their 50th anniversaries here at Marvel this year. And I'm lucky enough to be joined in this panel by actually a pretty great range of talent covering almost the beginning of these properties right up to the present day. So if I may, let me introduce you to Mr. John Romita Jr. Mr. Brian Bendis, is it? Bendis. Mr. Brian Bendis. And the rascally one, Mr. Roy Thomas. So this, again, forgive me, Roy, for turning immediately to you, but you were there as close to the beginning of it as pretty much anybody. You and Denny O'Neil, I think, are the ones closest to the beginnings of it. So, for those...
one of the new kids.
Yeah, exactly. The, Stan, Jack, Steve Ditko, Dick Ayers, some of the great talents of the Atomic Age of Comics and the Golden Age of Comics relaunched an entire medium in 1961 with Fantastic Four, and then with Spider-Man, with Fantastic Four, with the Hulk, with Thor, with these amazing, in like a 14-month period of time, Stan and his collaborators rolled out all these amazing properties. And it's hard to believe, for those of us who've been reading them since we were children, it's hard to believe that they're 50 years gone now. They're 50 years along the way, but it seems like only yesterday that I was picking up my first Daredevil comic, you were picking up your first Fantastic Four or whatever. But they couldn't have, even with that momentum, even with that creative explosion, they couldn't do it all themselves. Now, Roy, talk to us about how you came to the company and how you sort of became, in short order, Stan's right-hand man and sort of the heir apparent, if you will.
Well, of course, I bought Fantastic Four off the stand. I bought 2 copies and I sold the spare when the price went up to 50 cents. No fool of me.
You still have the other one?
The other one's in a bound copy. Yeah, it's
okay.
In a bound copy. Water damage, but still, it's worth more than the 10 cents I paid for it. And so I bought them all. In fact, my first contact with Stan was that I missed one issue of Spider-Man early, with the 5th or 6th one or something, and I dropped a line to Marvel, and he sent me the copy, and a little note. But I never thought it worked for Marvel because it looked like he was, wanting to write everything himself.
Yeah.
And when he wrote it always got better anyway than when someone else wrote it. So, but in the meantime, I got offered this job to be the assistant editor of the Superman comics, which I didn't really read, but I loved the character, and I loved DC. I was in touch with Joey Schwartz over Justice League and all that. Loved that guy. Gardner Fox, who wrote that stuff. So I went to work for DC and discovered in a week or so, actually in about 15 minutes, but over the next week or two, that I just couldn't get along with the editor.
Neither could any other Marvel-based life form.
But I wanted to meet Stan Lee because I knew he was doing the best. Much as I loved the stuff by Broom, Gardner, and the other people, I knew that Stan was doing the best writing in comics, and that they were the most exciting comics. Of course, I've been a fan of Kirby since the 50s or 40s even, and Ditko since Captain Atom at least. And so I dropped him a line and say, could I go out and buy you a drink somewhere? And he said, I don't socialize too much, I live out in the island, but if you want to take this little writing test, we have a few pages. So I sneak up on one of my lunch hours, and I meet Flo Steinberg, who brings me out some pages, the secretary, and next day I started to write something, just bang something out.
Let me interrupt you for just a second, if I may, just for the newbies in the audience. So the way Stan and his collaborators did all their work back then, Stan would either verbalize or just throw out real quick plot synopses to the artists, who would then be responsible for turning those pages into actual storytelling, and then Stan would come and add dialogue later once the art was finished. So when you say writing
these were pages that had been penciled and written. They were from Fantastic Four #2, which had already been published.
Okay.
They had taken the art stats, they had whited out all the balloons and various things like this, and then put like little tiny simple notes, they go after Dr. Doom type of stuff. It was 4 pages. And of course I could have looked at the comics had I had them with me, but I mean that wouldn't help me. But I just banged them out at the little hotel room where I was staying. And then I went the next day. I was working my way up the food chain. When I went back in, Saul Brodsky, the production manager, of course, of the comic books, he came out to pick them up for me still, and so forth. And the next day, Friday morning, I was proofreading a Supergirl story drawn by Jim Mooney. When I got this call, this high-pitched voice I recognized right away was Flo Steinberg, even though I'd met her for 2 minutes. Yeah. And she said, Stan would like to see you. Can you come up at lunch? So I sneak off at lunch. It's about a 10-minute walk or so, and I go in and meet Stan. And he knew my name from, I reviewed the first issue of the Fantastic Four in a little bad review it was good review, but it was badly written in the Comic Collector, the first issue of that, and when I was doing Alter Ego. And, so about 10 minutes or so after we met, we were talking for a few minutes, and I asked him about continued stories, which the readers hated, He said, I hate them, but they make it easier for me to do it because I can remember what I did last month. Things like that. And I said, why did you take Thor and Iron Man out of Avengers? The questions we all wanted to know. If I got a job, we never discussed the writing yet, ever. Before or after, ever. He did, But suddenly he looks out the window. He likes to look out the window from the floor and look at the girls out the window. And down there, and he suddenly he's looking out the window and he says, so, what do we have to do to hire you away from Nashville? And I said, well, offer me a job. I said, I don't like it there. They decreased by $10 a week the amount they offered me when I got here. Said, offer me the amount of money that I was supposed to get, it was $110 a week, which is more than now, but it still wasn't a princely sum. And I said, and I'll come over. So he says, okay. So he says, well, I have to give them notice. I won't leave them in the lurch, and everything. So I go back, half an hour late coming back from lunch, and which is noticed, of course. Weiser calls me into his office with his little buzzer that has this Pavlovian reaction on me and a few cubicles down. Not only me, I discovered, but Nelson Bridwell before him and after me. And I go down there and he starts, people have told him to be nice to me. Ed Eisenberg and Julie have been telling him, we don't think Roy is going to take the kind of treatment you're dishing out the way that Nelson Bridwell did the last year or two, and so forth. You really should be, a little nicer. So Mort was giving it his try. He was trying to be human, Okay. And he's saying, well, the guys would tell me maybe I'm a little hard on you and this and that, so he's trying to be nicer. I said, well, it's very nice, Mort, and I understand, and I do admire your talent, what you've done with Superman and everything, but it's kind of academic because I'm afraid I've accepted an offer to work for Marvel, which kind of jaw kind of drops. And I said, well, but I said, I told him, that I had to get a 2 or 3 weeks notice as long as you need. I said, I think you should get Nelson back, but I said, 2 or 3 weeks, whatever you need, I'll stick around. I won't leave you in the lurch. He says, you're a spy for Stan Lee, get out. So 20 minutes later, I'm back there and Stan gives me a Modeling with Millie story drawn by Stan Goldberg to write. Yeah. And that was it. But I did stick around 15 years. It's 15 years at Marvel to show you I don't change job every 2 weeks. This was in July of 1965. By that time, Avengers had been out for about 2 years.
Yeah. Must I ask how old you were? Was that being
I was 4. No. No, I was 24. In fact, Wendell Crowley, the editor of Captain Marvel for years, and I met him a few months earlier, he said, you're an old man getting into the field at 24, so we were all teenagers,
That's amazing. And in a very short period of time, well, I guess, so where did you really start to make your mark on the mainstream characters? I'm trying to place whether it was X-Men or Avengers first, but it was X-Men.
Oh, no. Well, that shows you how much of a mark I made. The first thing he gave me after doing a couple of Modeling with Millie, and then Millie the Model, working my way up, and Patsy and Hetty, which became the last issue of that. I'd already finished off the last issues of Charlton's Son of Vulcan and Blue Beetle. I think if they wanted a book to die, they just gave it to me. But anyway, so after I'd been there a few weeks, maybe a month or so, Gene Colan drew his first Iron Man. Tales of Suspense, number 73. Of course, I knew it was Adam Austin, from Submariner. And Stan gave it to me to write. Beautiful, and so I start right off with this beautiful artwork, but he didn't like entirely what I wrote, so he rewrote about half of it. That's a story with no credits. It says everybody worked on this, and I'm in there, and Flo Steinberg, who was the secretary, and Marie Sever, who colored it. No real credits except, it's about 50% me, 50% Stan. That's how he was done. And then he gave, the next thing he gave me worked out a little better. He, and I'm so pleased he did. The next thing was, he gave me a Ditko Doctor Strange. Right. Ditko had plotted and drawn, so I wrote 2 of those until, I don't know, I guess I got moved off, but Denny O'Neil came in. The first time he gave me a series was the morning after the November 1965 New York blackout, where Denny O'Neil and I, who I had helped bring him to New York a few months after I was there, we were trapped on a subway for several hours together. And the next morning, since there was no, there's no electricity, and so forth, I didn't work. I had this little electric Smith Road portable. I didn't do anything. I didn't finish off my Millie the Model comics. So I come in the next morning and Stan says, well, I didn't get a chance to do as much work. You only get about 10 pages of Daredevil with a candle brigade. Can you believe this? He gets his candle brigade and he types 10 pages of Daredevil. While the rest of us are just hanging around, eating rice pudding and being glad we don't have to work that day. He's just a phenomenal guy. And anyway, so then he gives me Sergeant Fury, already drawn by Dick Ayers, and so forth, and that became the first regular series. The first superhero series that I kept during the time was the X-Men.
Yeah, that's up,
By Rick Roth. And luckily, a few months later, the Avengers, which is the book I was, if it wasn't the Fantastic Four, that was the book I was really after, because that was like the Justice Society at Marvel.
Exactly. Well, that plays all your strengths. It's taking the older characters, banding together as a team, and turning it into something.
Oh, no, by strengths, it's just what I wanted to do,
You know what? I'm not on this side, but you were, I think, in Marvel, the first writer to then take a book like Avengers and let it evolve into another kind of book. Like there was the Avengers, and Stan had already replaced some members, but by the time you had taken over the book, now you would really evolve the concept of it to what people are even thinking about in the movies. And I was curious about the process or if it just evolved in your head, but with the vision and all that, it became something different than its initial premise.
Well, it was pretty close, because actually when they did the Avengers movie first, is they went back, even though they didn't have Ant-Man, they went back to pretty much the first issue and this first issue. What I was always trying to do is, even though I liked it with Quicksilver and all that, and I know the sales actually went up because people were wondering what the heck Stan's going to do with Captain America and the also-rans, And, but it actually did very well, but that wasn't my kind of book and so forth. So as soon as I got in, I started trying to bring in Thor and Iron Man again. He'd say, oh, you got Iron Man and Thor, you got to take it out there. Even though he wasn't a real heavy hand, and he barely looked at the, he eventually proofread him kind of, but so I would, I'd sneak him in, and then he would make me take him out after an issue or two. And I kept doing this for 2 or 3 couple of years until finally he gave up and kind of, let me keep him in. And as far as the Vision thing was in '68, we decided it was about time for another new member. And my idea, thank heaven it didn't happen, for my sake, I guess, eventually, is that I just wanted to bring in this Vision character I'd seen that Simon Kirby had created, just have him come in from another dimension, and everything be stuck in the world. Stan says, no, I want the next new Avenger to be an android. Now, I never asked him why. He never told me why. Did he want me to explore the human condition? I don't know. I guess he figured I would. He just says he has to be an android. He says, well, does this make a difference? No, just make him an android. So I made up an android, and I called him the Vision. Has nothing much in common with Jack's character, except he looks like him, and I didn't put Spy Smasher's diamond on the cover. And then I made had the face made red, and Stan, after it was printed, the first he saw it, says, why did you have him make the face red? It's dumb-looking color, So nobody's going to like an android with a red face. And well, Martin Goodman told you nobody was going to like a Spider-Man, but they did. So, and the readers, find it funny. And why? I said, well, we got a green Hulk, and we got light blue Atlanteans. I guess I could have made it white with the paper we print on. You could see the other side of the page. So I figured red was as good as anything, and he didn't agree. So it worked out okay. Nobody ever. And later when John Byrne made it kind of white, we had better paper by then, so it worked out. But that was all. It was just a bunch of happy accidents. Just all I was ever trying to do, besides maybe restore Iron Man and Thor, and occasionally sneak in Justice Society type stories, chapterized like the old JSA stories, I was just trying to do my version of imitating
Did you have did you have control over what Spider-Man was in or out? Was it he was going to be the free agent of the group? Was he part of
Spider-Man was never in the Avengers when I wrote it.
Oh, I was saying at some point was he considered to go back in? Was he?
I never went after Spider. I never liked Spider. I mean, I love Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man as a character, but I never wanted to write it. Which is funny. I've written 13 years with Stan the Spider-Man strip, but I never wanted to write Spider-Man in my life. I wanted to write the Fantastic
And that's what
Four.
you told me. You didn't want you didn't want to work with me, so I.
That's right. That's right. Roy Thomas Jr. and John Romita Jr. together, that would just be the Junior Rangers, we could call
Let
them.
me ask you this, you worked with John Buscema during those years.
John,
and
oh yeah.
I never met the man, but I've read literally every interview I could get. He always seemed a reluctant superhero artist, a reluctant popular artist. But the work he was doing with you was the best of his career.
He hated doing superheroes.
He did it, but did
The worst thing, the thing he hated the most was Spider-Man. He said, that's the worst character. You know, I can't imagine anybody ever tried it. The Fantastic Four was bad.
They didn't need me.
He loved Jack's work. He was a huge admirer of Jack Kirby. But he didn't want to draw these popular things. Like when we would do Conan, he loved Conan. He said, that's the thing I want to draw. I never want to draw anything else again. Then I had brought in Red Sonja. He says, I don't like to draw Red Sonja so much. He says, I want to draw the dancing girls, you know, but I don't want to draw Red Sonja, you know, and everything. Not even in an iron bikini did he want to draw. But he was just a very particular guy who, you know, who sometimes I think he really did hate comics as much as he said. Sometimes
Right.
not for sure.
I was the production assistant that would take his pages, photocopy them, and send them on to you. I was working as your assistant. You don't remember that, but you hated Spider-Man. But I would speak to John Buscema. I got to know him pretty well because he was good friends with my father, and he hated to do costumes until he tried Avengers and then saw a royalty check. And his words were, I hope there's no children in the room, fucking costumes, I can make money. Those were his words. And he said, all these years I was doing Conan, sand dunes and sparse costumes and no backgrounds, I should have known I could work on costumes and make a lot more money. That was just when he quit smoking, and suddenly the pages looked like he had used a chisel. He was angry when he was
liked
passing.
he liked comic art. He didn't think it was art. Like when he was just amazed with that, I would save and put up a picture of his in my living room, and I said, well, you know, I've got Prince Valiant. He said, well, you know, he was a huge Foster fan, Tarzan especially. And he said, well, I love Hal Foster, or I wouldn't have him hanging in my living room.
Do you remember the backs? Do you remember the backs of the pages that he sent in?
Oh yeah, I used to print pictures from
We
him.
used to gather around the copy machine, John Buscema, the backs of John Buscema's breakdowns were the most beautiful illustrations you have ever seen in your life. And he said he would warm up. It looked like 12 hours of work. And he would warm up to do about 8 pages of breakdowns a day. But the background, the backs of the pages were so beautiful. Everybody gathered around the copy machine. I think it was a mimeograph machine, man.
I think it was a sketchograph.
And then we would all hand out these beautiful copies, and he didn't care. He didn't remember what he was doing. He would warm up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go 7 to 7, and he was done for the day.
Yeah, IDW put out a book of his career, and some of those drawings are presented in there. And you do look at them and go, that's just around.
That's just warm up.
Yeah.
And that's just a tiny, what's been preserved is only a
He
tiny
was
percentage.
possibly the best illustrator that ever worked in comics, as far as I can see. And he was brilliant, but he was an advertising guy first.
Yeah. Well, and your dad did a lot of advertising work too. And your dad was also, I would argue, one of the
I hated
greatest.
Spider-Man.
But your dad was obviously one of the greatest, most talented, and most influential artists to ever work at Marvel. You had nothing to do with that, they called you anyway. At what point, when you were a kid, it's like, you know, 66, 67, 68, and the Marvel machine is really taken off and stuff. At what point did you twig the fact that maybe there's something interesting going on here?
Specifically, down to the cover, it was Daredevil number 12.
Yeah?
And then he had to explain to me what was going on. I didn't know what a superhero was because he was doing romance books. So when he stopped doing romance books and suddenly he was doing the Daredevil cover, he had done something before, but because I was thinking he was doing romance, I didn't go up in his attic. And one day I couldn't sleep, went up in the middle of the night, he was working on Daredevil number 12, and he explained to me that Daredevil was, you know, he's surrounded by all these bad guys, he's going to beat them all up.
Yeah.
And then this Tarzan guy's up in the roof, in the trees, he's going to help out, and his pet is not a chimpanzee, but it's a saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
And wow, a saber, what is a saber-tooth tiger? I had no idea what that was. And then he explained to me that Daredevil was blind, and I think the top of my head exploded. And then he went on to explain, and he spent about 6 hours stopping work, probably missed the deadline because of me, at least he used me as an excuse, and explained to me what a superhero was, and I think I was hooked.
You got bit then,
And he kept that cover, and he has it, and he said it's mine, and passed it on to my son, or put him through college with it, and I probably could put about 3 people through college
right now.
Did I ever tell you about the day I met John Romita Sr. the other day?
Please, no.
I've been there about 2 weeks, you know, at Marvel, so I've been just about a month in New York, and suddenly saw Brodsky, who by then I learned was a comic artist himself. So I want to introduce you to somebody. This is John Romita. He used to work for Marvel. He worked in DC Romance. He's going to be working with us now. And John said hello, and I said, oh, you're the guy that did all those great Captain America stories, right? Back in the 50s. And John always passed out. You know, he couldn't believe that anybody, you know, remembered that he had done, because he'd signed them. I said, well, you know, I know you also did, you know, and that was the best stuff. I also know you did Western Kid, and you did a 5-page Crusader story in the Black Knight series. I mean, this is the kind of stuff Mark Wade will now tell people too, just, you know, little tiny detail. But the Crusader story, I think, really got him. This is a 5-page story of one issue of the series. But, you know, he couldn't believe that anybody remembered Captain America.
Yeah, he was a Milton Caniff fan, and he ate Milton Caniff and Frank Springer, and he didn't think anybody would care because it was.
When I was a kid, I could tell this is somebody who likes Jack Kirby, Simon and Kirby. And I said, and there's these Caniff faces and women and so forth there, and this was like a head-on collision between Milt Caniff and Jack Kirby. You know?
That's true.
And he said, well, that's what I was trying to do.
That's a great.
That's when he peaked as far as I'm concerned. Everything else has been downhill since then.
So you, John, I mean, so you're second generation then. You get to come, you're second generation Marvel, or actually, I mean, technically you'd be more like third generation. I was talking about in terms of you were there as a kid watching it in a way that nobody else who came into comics when you did was able to watch it. You were able to watch it from behind home plate.
Sure.
And I just think that's amazing. So as you got into comics, as you decided this is where you wanted to hang your hat, I mean, of the stuff that you read, the stuff that you looked at, the characters that you looked at, like what was it that you really wanted to sink your own teeth into?
Daredevil and Spider-Man, because that's what my father had done. But interestingly enough, my father was penciling over Kirby breakdowns for a while, because Stan thought Jack should direct everybody. So he was penciling over Kirby breakdowns and inking some covers of those that worked. And I got to see the Avengers covers and the Hulk and so on. And so I was introduced to the Avengers early on. And then it was Daredevil and Spider-Man. So that my first taste of him working regularly was Daredevil.
Yeah.
That's why I've always had a real a love for Daredevil to draw. But Spider-Man's been almost like a brother in the family. It's amazing. It's always been part of the family.
Man, if you only knew somebody who was writing Daredevil.
Well, he took me past. But he would take me past where Peter Parker lived.
Yeah.
And I think that was all. This was my brother couldn't care less. He was just not interested in the way I was. But to show you what kind of poor sap I was, that was my day of excitement. It was, wow, Peter Parker lives here. You know, it made my day.
How old were you when you were first published by Marvel?
18.
Wow. And what book was that?
I don't know, but boy, oh boy, it's lining somebody's birdcage right now.
How old were you when you did like Contest of Champions?
That was 80, so I was 24.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're all kids. We were talking about this at one of the panels last night. Jerry Conway, you know, not only was writing Spider-Man, you know,
I'm 57, folks. Just in case.
Are you 57? I have not been the young guy at the panel. 10 years is awesome.
We were talking about Jerry Conway was not only writing Spider-Man in the early 70s, he was the same age as Peter Parker, which I think was really sort of amazing when you think about being able to put yourself in that suit and think about how that character works.
And also, it's also amazing to me following in your father's insane footsteps.
If you're,
and you're not screwing it up.
I know.
No, you do. There's a lot of guys, like I was reading this article about Martin Scorsese's daughter, who directs, and how hard times he's having.
Sure.
And like, oh, who would want?
That's just interesting. Yeah, like
first of all, when you have a father like mine who refused to let me get uncomfortable about it by reinforcing everything.
Yeah.
In my head, it started out as my father and Jack Kirby and Gummy Summer. By the time it got to my fingertips, it looked like me, and that's depressing. And I thought it was going to look like that stuff because I'd been around it, and it was infused.
It looked more like Kirby. To me, it looked more like Kirby than anything else. The first time I saw the very
that
first Iron Man.
that six-page Spider-Man abortion was saved by Al Milgrom.
The first time I saw it was the Iron Man issue. The very first Iron Man. And I remember opening that up and going, wow, that has the impact of Jack Kirby. It's not as
Well,
good.
my father, he was such a sweetheart about things. He really helped me out through all this rough time.
But John became, you know, not only was John Romita, like, you know, my way of thinking too, one of the best artists in the field, but you became somebody older who doesn't really, you know, pay much attention to anything that happened after 1974, you know. But you become, you know, just, I think, one of the handful of best artists to come out of the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
So you have 2 people in the family, you know, that did it. That's quite an achievement, just to survive and be a good professional.
This is why we never let the Kubert family and the Romita family fly on an airplane together. Mickey Mantle Jr.
Speaking about ego, there's my father who still claims that Joe Kubert kept his feet on the ground.
Yeah.
Because he said, here I am, I'm 80 years old, and Joe Kubert is 82, whatever he was at the time. And he says, I'm just sitting, relaxing in my armchair, and Joe Kubert is still putting out work every month. And it's better than anything I've ever done. That's my father, but Kubert is brilliant until he passes.
Yeah.
My father, 96, he says, I'm done. I'm done with work. I don't give a damn. I want to sleep.
Your father's really 96?
No, he was in 96.
Oh, in 96. I was like in 96.
But it was insane. But I remember you could literally, you could almost hear his pencil hit the ground the day he
Most artists,
done.
most artists need art. It's therapeutic, and he did. He was a depression baby. And to him, it was putting food on the table.
Yeah.
And he thought of it as labor. He thought he was digging ditches because he struggled with every line, scrutinized himself, drove himself
He didn't
crazy.
draw that many lines, Martin. Martin used to, Stan always says, I'm having trouble.
That's what Stan says to him. Romita, I love you, but you didn't do enough work, you lazy bastard.
Martin's giving me trouble again because he says, what does John Romita do? You know, because the thing was, not only was he working where he was, and he was a little sober, he was very meticulous because Stan was having him even basically plot the books. And plus, every few minutes, you'll draw this hand,
Yeah,
make Neil Adams,
Stan had him doing everything on washing
something.
windows, it's true. And then he thought it was a job and quit, and he's happy to quit.
Let me talk to the kid on the panel real quick.
By the way, the kid who looks the oldest.
I know.
He looks better than me. How old is he? Because,
You know what? Seriously, no kidding. I did a panel in Baltimore a couple of years ago, and it was the 70s panel. I think you were on it, and I know Bernie Wrightson was on it, Len was on it, Mar, and all those guys. And you look down the row of guys, all of them at their best, all of them in their late 50s at the time, but almost all of them in their mid to late 60s. Not one of them with a day over 40. It's just, that's what I cling to.
when you stay in your basement decade after decade.
Exactly.
You preserve
But in all seriousness, like it
It's
also
a pact with the devil.
Yeah. No, seriously, like getting to do what you probably describe it much the same way I do, which is that if I would have done this job for free when I was a kid, like I got to grow up to do that, which when I was a kid I would have done for
My
free.
wife, who runs our business, has asked me not to say that out loud anymore. It's a bad negotiating tactic.
Yeah, but it keeps you young. It's what. So as the latecomer, Mr. How long have you been? 15 years now.
Yeah, I've been in Marvel since '99, and there's a couple trickles of things before that. But
So how did this stuff get on your radar? Not necessarily.
no, I mean I've been diehard since
Yeah.
birth. I mean I literally have an early memory of being like 4 or 5 years old drawing Spider-Man and like passed over table, and I drew Spider-Man, and one arm was much bigger than the other, and I showed it to my dad, and my dad goes, "Why is one arm bigger than the other?" And I didn't notice. I had screwed it up, and I just said, "Well, that's where he keeps his webs." And that's a behavior I continue to anyway, but
That's how you handle your editors tonight. That's what you say to me.
I meant to do that. Anyway, so yeah, but it was in my blood. I mean, it was a done deal at a very early age.
Well, then with the benefit of 35 years of these, I want to get back to characters. I want to get Avengers, X-Men, Doctor Strange, Sergeant Fury, the ones who celebrate their 50th. with the benefit of 35 years of that stuff behind you as you jump in as a professional, looking back on that, on the stuff you read and just the stuff that you've become familiar with since, like what do you see as the high points, or what is it about these characters that you think really speaks to you or makes them?
Well, there's, I know now, having looked back further, having worked on them, that it certainly has something to do with father issues.
Yes.
I know that the deepest thing that I was not aware of when I was a little kid is that my parents were divorced. My dad, I had a relationship with my dad that only reminded me, oh, that's why she divorced you. Okay, I get it. And then you read any Marvel comic, and it's either the father's dead, a bad guy, or you know, it's all father issues. And so I know that was the connection, and these were my role models and such. And there was a consistency, and there was a lot of love on the page. There was like the people who were making them loved each other, the characters loved each other. You know, even Hawkeye and Captain America, they're fighting, but they love each other. And obviously sparked my imagination with every panel. Like every panel, like I started imagining other stories, other ideas, and I was excited beyond comprehension. And yeah, I think I announced at age 6, I'm in. By the way, I'm going to be the artist of Spider-Man. Now, I got pretty close. I'm into the artist of Spider-Man, but only my mom really appreciates. I had announced it. I proclaimed it. And I got to it. And when you get there, and you look back at how insane it is that you actually got the job, it's crazy.
My parents never got a divorce, although I begged them to. That's Woody Allen on that spike.
You know, we can't, Marvel is all about the fans, we can't leave you guys out. We've got a microphone right up here up front if you want to start lining up and answering some, asking some questions. Before we do that, I just want to get back to these guys. It would be embarrassing to ask them each to talk about what they think they brought to the table when it comes to these characters, but I don't think it's unfair to ask each other. Like Brian, when you think of Roy, when you think of John, like in terms of what they've been able to bring to these characters over the years, or what the high points have been.
Well, with John, I have a lot of love for his work, more than I think I've even expressed, like when we worked together. And it was funny, like I've been at Marvel for years and never felt worthy to work with him. Like that would be
I still feel that way.
Couldn't say that during negotiations, could you?
I didn't even ask. I didn't even ask for John because that felt like, oh, that's you know, that's.
I'm shooting too high.
And when we were coming up with putting the roller cage together, Joe said, I want to see you and Johnny together. I want to see you write the Avengers, and I want to see them carved out of granite, like Johnny does. Johnny will have those Avengers look like they're just the stones come to life. And I went, oh, that's what Johnny does. Johnny, literally, it's like sculpture come to life on the page. And so I'm stealing Joe's line, but that's what it is to me. Like, you know.
I got terrified because I'd seen what he'd done before. And this is a group book. Kind of like getting on a freeway on a tricycle.
And I do remember, like, when you weren't in the room when this happened, because you and John would do it, like, think he'll work with me? And he goes, yeah. And then, I forget who said it, wasn't Dan or Joe, said, none of those superheroes on the rooftop talking to each other for 10 pages. Give your superhero committee meetings down to a minimum.
I was hoping you were going to do what you did with Bagley on the Spider-Man, saying, listen, a couple of close-ups, I can get by with this. But then all of a sudden it exploded into Cecil B. effing DeMille.
No, I mean, is it even oh my goodness, Johnny, that's the craziest Johnny story ever. It goes either way, you know, so sorry about that.
It was a learning experience even after my time in the business.
And with Roy, and this is hard to describe, Roy, but we're all like past generation, right? Like Stan and Jack and those guys invented it all. And then you were like one of the first guys who is us, which is we love these characters, probably more than even Stan and Jack and everyone did. Love them with a whole heart, and then carried the torch. And my friend Matt Fraction is the thing that this show, we're torch bearers. You carry the torch and you run. It's a relay race. So you run as long as you can, or as long as they'll let you, and then you're passing the torch. You were the first guy to pick up the torch and start running, and that's an amazing accomplishment.
I haven't done anything to get out of people.
I have the blackmail story about you.
Oh, what?
1972, in Radio City Music Hall.
Yeah.
You danced and sang Bebop Balula by
No, it wasn't Radio City Music, it was Carnegie Hall. Please.
I sang. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice. And you danced and you shook and you were up on a screen.
I don't know if dancing would be.
Got it on tape,
moving around.
got it on tape, put it on YouTube, you're in deep shit.
I wish there was a videotape of that. There isn't, right?
You sang it and you danced.
Well,
you were shaking it.
Well, my friend,
You didn't break it.
Stan asked me to help out with the show, you know, and so forth for.
What was that called?
It was, I don't know, Stan Lee and Marvel Comics at Carnegie Hall. So it was January '72, and so I ended up. I was running up and down the aisle in this leftover Spider-Man costume that had been made a few years before, which is a couple of photographs. I've still got the Spider-Man costume. It's for sale, folks. Anyway, it was made in '64 for a Marie Macy's parade, but the actors got drunk and never showed up. I still got it. And there was a Medusa, a Fantastic Four, so I put my first wife, Jeannie, and a couple other people, Linda Parenti, wife of the writer Bill Parenti, and somebody else. I think Mary McFerrin might be the third.
Yes,
they were dancing as the girls. So I had to say, and Barry Smith, before it was Barry Windsor Smith, was up there with the. He was one of the guitarists, and Herb. And Gary Friedrich was supposed to be the drummer, but he got caught in a snowstorm, or in Missouri. He couldn't get up in time, and they wouldn't let him go on because he had practice with it, which made him mad. But anyway, so that was the other thing. And I wrote a few pieces. And one of the things I'm proudest of after the fact of just getting to sing at Carnegie Hall was the fact that I wrote words for a couple of actors to say, like a piece about Captain America. It was read by Tom Wolfe, who was one of my idols. You know, and how many people get to write something for Tom Wolfe to read out loud?
That's right.
That was a thrill. I invented it a couple of times, but that was a nice. But the big thing was, I figured if we're going to do this, I had this great idea. You know, I've never sung on the stage at Carnegie Hall. Not many people have, so I thought, you know, they're not going to pay me, but I'll do it. So I came with, hey, great idea. What if we got dressed in, I don't know what I was in. I don't think maybe it was.
I think just
Spider-Man.
shirt.
Yeah, but you know, what if we just got up there and we got some girls dressed up in these costumes, you know, and so forth, and dancing on the stage, you know, and so forth as Medusa and so forth, and we did a couple songs. So, and since I had sung in the band with Gary, you know, I don't play an instrument, so I had been a vocalist a few years earlier with Gary, and back in Missouri, you know, at the Roto Fun roller rink. So we got this going, and I wrote some new lyrics.
How do you get to Carnegie Hall?
I wrote some new lyrics for Bebop Balula. I don't remember. It had regard with the Hulk, you know, or with this character or that character. It all had to do with Marvel characters. I don't remember them anymore. And I just got to say, the only problem was the coordination, the microphones was so bad that they had some lines they were supposed to say back to me, and we couldn't hear each other. So it was a mess. But and Barry Smith. Sabotage, he insisted, he kept pushing to sing some John Lennon song. Well, I'm a big fan of Lennon McCartney, but this was some non-melodic John Lennon song, post McCartney. And it was, you know, I don't remember the name of it, but we turned into a halt, and that was pretty disastrous. Bebop Balula, I think I did okay.
All we saw was a microphone stand and blonde hair.
That was it.
You're in the same shape now that you were in 1972, so.
I still sing, too.
Was it a successful night this night?
Well, it sold out. The second night, I'm not so sure they could have sold out. people were expecting, you know, so, but how do you do a comic book in that day and age and so forth? They had a few things on the screen. John was drawing.
That's
stuff.
right.
You know, he was drawing. Stan read his poem about God waking up. Tom Wolfe and a few other people. They had a couple. They had a band playing.
It was recorded.
There's gotta be video
There's gotta be
somewhere.
On reel to reel.
And, you know, and I just got started saying, well, you know, I've been singing Elvis Presley fan since so Lincoln said was Gene Vincent, right? I've been an Elvis fan since 1956.
Oh,
when I
this you were
first
sung
heard.
before. This is what.
Oh yeah, no, this was the first. This was the last time. I finally retired the act. You sat on Carnegie Hall. What am I supposed to do? Go back to the beer hall? Or it was fun, but it was not well received totally by the audience when they got there. So the kids were trying to blast. But we had a lot of fun. Oh yeah, I had fun. I don't care what the audience thought. Some of them liked it. Some of them.
Well, tell you what, let me throw these open to some of the questions here. What do you got, sir? Step up and actually, if you would be so kind as to make your questions fairly brief so we can get through a bunch of people. What you got, sir?
Two quick questions
Quick.
to Roy. I was fortunate enough to start reading Spider-Man and Daredevil when they first came out, and I have the first 350 copies of each one of those, starting from Amazing Fantasy. And it was a wisecracking Spider-Man that kind of attracted me to him, and the fact that I lived in a very rural part of South Carolina, go to the drugstore, wait for them every month, or every time the issue would come out. My question is,
Where in South Carolina?
a little town called Hollywood, South Carolina, just
Oh,
south.
sure, I've been there. I live in South Carolina.
Excellent. And so my question is, was there any awareness at Marvel at that time that you were reaching areas of the country that just had no other way of getting entertainment anyplace?
No, because the comics had always gone all over the country. They weren't reaching any. In fact, with Marvel, they hadn't been distributed by DC. They wouldn't have had any distribution at all, you know. So, but they were going all over. No, they weren't really thinking about individual places. You know, they just did it. You know, I mean, that's why I had to come up with the idea of Wolverine, because it suddenly occurred to me. And this is like in 1974. We have all these Canadian readers. You know, we haven't got a single Canadian character. So I took Glenn Keane and I said, call the Wolverine, he's Canadian, he's short, and he's feisty. Everything else is up to you.
Sergeant Fury and Howling Commanders, you have a British gentleman there. What brought that into
The British being Percy.
The character.
Oh, Percy, that was Stan. I don't know, he just put it, when Junior Juniper got killed, he brought in Percy, I guess to have, well, for one thing, they're called the Howling Commandos, and Commandos is a British term, not an American term. They were the Rangers. So I guess he figured if he was going to have people called Commandos, he should have one Brit in there. I don't know.
And he carried an umbrella.
Yeah. I heard it was a great idea.
And I gotta say, one of the high points of my life is that I got to live long enough to go to a movie where Percival Pinkerton and Dave Jones are main characters in the movie. And it's wild. So, yes, sir.
Oh, well, this question is about one of the comic books that in Mexico, I'm from Mexico City, by the way. It's just really hit big. It's Civil War.
Yeah.
Now, I have a radio show, and I hate that comic. I get because first, I just don't like seeing heroes fighting heroes. Now, Avengers versus X-Men, that I kind of understood. But Civil War, you know, with Captain America and Iron Man fighting it out, and just getting all their friends together in two different, bands, and just slugging it out, and the ending was horrible. Every time I say it,
Tell us what you really feel.
I'm sorry, this is why my show is so controversial. Now, everybody that listens to the show hates me for saying this because they love the comic book in Mexico. It's a huge boom in comic books right now, and that was like the biggest hit in recent years. But I was wondering, Roy, Mark, well, I'm guessing, Brian, you love the show, that comic book because you kind of work around it. But John, what do you think about that, with all this, just heroes fighting heroes?
Well, they weren't fighting over a girl or a candy bar. They were fighting over civil liberties and what they thought was the future of America. So it was a pretty big ideal. That was kind of the point of it. And then I was there the day it was born in the room. It was part of a retreat of all the writers were there. It was a pretty bad retreat. It was probably one of our worst, where we were working on stuff for like 2 straight days, and we were just like, we went from loving each other to like, I gotta get out of this room. It was just not working, and we literally, for the first time ever, went to Joe and Dan and go, this is going really badly, and we wouldn't buy anything that we're talking about. And then he goes, we'll bring it up in the room. And then we literally had this conversation about, if we do an event, if we do another event, it's got to be the biggest thing, and they can't just be fighting for nothing. They got to be fighting over something that has an ideal. And so that's where it came from. It wasn't just let's have them beat each other up. It was what is our world like, and what are people worried about, and have it reflect that. So.
Yeah, but superheroes have been fighting each other for years. Spider-Man, Daredevil, the Hulk beat everybody up.
I just thought the way that it came out, and I'm sorry I'm taking too much time. Sorry. I just,
You don't look at
the way that it came out, it was kind of like too quickly. They just started fighting so quickly, and the way Iron Man just backed the government so easily. I just thought that was going against character, but I guess I'm totally wrong because
I haven't read Civil War because I haven't really. I look at them and admire the art, but I haven't read them for many years. The day I quit being editor-in-chief in '74 was the day I quit reading comics regularly, except for an occasional here and there. And the thing is, though, when I have somebody else's definitive word. A guy I know named Stan Lee, when I was talking to him on the phone about Spider-Man strip one day, he says, he says, he said, I think this, have you seen the Civil War? He says, I think the Civil War thing they have going is the most brilliant idea I've ever seen done in a comic book, so I'm afraid you're in a great minority.
I'm a particularly big fan of Doctor Strange, who I think is tremendously underappreciated, and particularly with the brain trust that we have there in this panel. Thank God.
Great character.
You guys know these characters so well, so excuse the goofy setup, but by the eye of Agamotto, the omnipotent Ashton, the vapors of the Deaths of Ashanti, the Crimson Bands of the Sidorak, the Ruby Rings of Ragador, and the Horios of Hogoth, is there a particular run of Doctor Strange that would be your go-to recommendation to somebody wanting to get into the character?
No.
Yes.
Say no to whatever you're going to say about
I'm a big fan of Ditko's Doctor Strange.
And Brian K. Vaughan's demo was really good too.
And Steve Englehart's sizing that stuff. That was great.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. It's interesting to talk about the genesis of the comics and some of the civil liberties issues that were brought up earlier. Right now, a lot of the movies, the Avenger movie, the new Star Trek movie, they address things like civil liberties, drone strikes, militarization of organizations that are supposed to be peaceful. Back in the 60s and 70s was the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. So my question is when you were writing these comics, how much did you think about that? Or was the purpose to be escapist and to avoid those issues?
I'm the only person doing it.
I guess I was asking.
Well, Stan had always been aware that he didn't like to get into controversy, and so forth. So, and because that hadn't really worked well with the early Cold War stuff back in the early '60s, and so forth. It just somehow seemed like the reader didn't even like that idea of the commies as the villains. I liked it fine, and not just like I had in the '50s. Then I'm an old, unconstructed anti-communist, so it doesn't make any difference. But he was very interested in civil rights. Long before they did even Black Panther, I know by the time I came there, he was telling the artists, to put people of different races into the crowd scenes and do this and that. And he was, edging in that direction. But he just didn't want to take sides in the Vietnam War after having a couple of stories with just the idea of supporting the fighting men and all that kind of thing, but he just didn't want to get involved in that. Because, you can only lose. You got people that love that feel that we should be in Vietnam, and you even have bigots. You want to sell to bigots. You won't pander to them, but you wouldn't mind if they spend their dimes. But he wouldn't compromise his principles. He wouldn't say something and calmly take a stand on something he didn't like. It just, that you just didn't do things like that those days. Thank you.
Yeah, I worked at a newspaper for a couple of years, and my editor taught me a very important lesson that I'm glad I learned before I broke into comics, that anything you say about sex, politics, religion, will have half your audience tell you no. Yeah, there's nothing you can say that half the people won't go, how dare you. So, yeah.
I started reading comic books in the late 70s, and you couple together your sense and by random comics until one day I ran across X-Men and ran across Wolverine. And I'm like, finally, there is a guy out there who is not going to beat up this guy and allow him to come back on the field to rob the store or whatever again. This guy is going to kill these dudes, kill some ninjas.
I bet you like Man of Steel, didn't you?
I despised Spider-Man, and I was a Wolverine guy. But when I hit about 15, I discovered Doctor Strange, and since then, Doctor Strange has been by far my favorite character. Thor slips in there once in a while. But what was Doctor Strange's motivation, place in the Marvel Universe from back then now? He seems to either be, I'm in charge of the whole situation kind of deal, or kind of like some Mariner to an extent too. I'm not, where am I? It's like there's some global problem, and he's been written out of the script somehow. It seems like he just comes into and out of the Marvel Universe very hard. I'm kind of saying, what's his role? And you see any role for Bendis for Doctor Strange being strong in the future?
Exactly.
I always look at him like
Is that rhetorical?
like a magic fireman, like if magic shows up, he shows up, and that's for the basic for the main Marvel universe, and sometimes it can come across like a Deus Ex Machina, like you're like, oh, here's Doctor Strange to explain the whole thing to us, but really he's the guy who would know when the magic's being used and what needs to be done and what have you. But I think he's one of the best characters in Marvel Comics, and I'm dying for a Doctor Strange movie or a TV show or something.
No, please let somebody, one more question, please. I don't want to end on that one. Please, I know we're running late, but just one more quick question. Thank you.
You don't hate Spider-Man, do you?
Anything really successful that you hate, because that's what we're getting. Spider-Man,
We have a lot of hate on
the Avengers movie,
All right, you're getting special dispensation, so make it an amazing question.
Okay, thank you.
that encompasses all 50 years of Marvel.
I didn't ask my question though. But my question is, how do you guys, like, with storylines, I know how you guys, with older comics and just coming into after somebody has already promoted a character, how do you guys go with generating your own ideas and going with other comics, and then also just how, just promoting your ideas, how it goes from your idea to a comic and promoting it and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I guess
Well, who follows, who's the toughest follow-up?
Well, the toughest follow-up is being on Daredevil after everyone who's ever been on Daredevil. I think you can agree with that.
Yeah, we agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, like that's the book that you go, well, that book has never sucked and has been the high watermark of all the public comics. So don't be the guy that tanks it.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I was relieved that we didn't, and I'm sure you have the same feeling.
Oh yeah, I prefer taking over books that suck. That's my preference.
I mean, it's not that, I remember even as a kid reading how Frank Miller took that book when it was like canceled.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to, I remember like 10 years old going, that's what you want to do. You want to get a book that's going to tank.
Exactly.
And not take it. And then even if you take it, it's not your fault.
Not your fault.
So,
I've had some bad experience. I've had a couple of death books.
Yeah.
I followed my father on Spider-Man,
Yeah.
Frank on Daredevil, Master Kelly on Daredevil.
Yeah.
Byrne and Paul Smith on the X-Men.
That's right, yeah.
I got death threats.
You really, yeah.
And that was my mother alone. My mother.
In my case, almost everything I did for the first 5 or so years I was there, I was the writer that came on after Stan Lee. That's not a great act to follow either. That's like, well, first Sinatra comes on, and then you can have the crowd. And, so I was always just trying to keep up to it. Sometimes I did, sometimes so good. The best thing that ever happened to me was that, and this was still Stan's blessing and encouragement, was that we went off and got Conan the Barbarian. And as a result, there was no real exact model. It was a little different. There was no exact model, and the model was more Robert E. Howard than it was Stan Lee. So I could go off and increasingly deviate, and because Stan never understood any of that stuff. He almost never read it. He would just get upset because where's the sound effects? I said, well, I don't use nonverbal sound effects in Conan. He just looked at me like I'd come in from another planet. Where's the thought balloon? The time when we had thought, I decided there shouldn't be any thought balloons in Conan. I mean, I think at this stage I began to become a different species from Stan.
Well, I hope that answered your question. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here.